excuse me. So I want to start with one of these little tricycle readings again. And this is from somebody, Jerry Larkin, Practicing with the Five Hindrances. Jerry, and it's actually quite an interesting little piece. It tempts me to want to. I think Jerry with a G is usually a woman, isn't it? Is that Jerry with a G usually? Don't know. We don't know. Anyway, what this person, I think I'm tempted to buy this book because both the title and her attitude or his attitude are kind of refreshing to me. So I'll read this little statement. It's an enormous relief to admit that I'm obsessed by a desire for something. First, I can stop trying so hard to pretend that I don't want something that I do want. Second, an overriding desire is often a moment of wishful thinking. Seeing our desire as what it is allows it to drop away or to at least loosen our hold on it. I'll read that again. It's an enormous relief to admit that I'm obsessed by a desire for something. First, I can stop trying so hard to pretend that I don't want something I do want. Second, an overriding desire is often a moment of wishful thinking. Seeing our desire as what it is allows it to drop away, or it at least loosens our hold on it. So as I said, this is from her book or his book called Practicing with the Five Hindrances. And all of you can just rattle off the five hindrances, I assume. No, we never, if Robert were here, he'd call me. We don't talk about the five hindrances in Zen. We don't know what they are. But they are part of classical Buddhism, part of the Buddha's teachings. And in a sense, as we'll see here, I think this is quite important. Okay, so the five hindrances are, I don't know if they're necessarily in order of importance, but sensual desires, ill will, apathy and laziness, anxiousness and doubt. Again, sensual desires, ill will, apathy and laziness, anxiousness and doubt. What I love about this statement that I read first is that this first statement, that allows me to pretend that I don't want something that I want, right? We all have these hindrances in our lives. They are part of being human. I think one of the things that Zen emphasizes that perhaps is not as clear in Theravadan Buddhism, and it is this idea of our humanity, that we cannot transcend or replace our humanity. The five hindrances will always be with us. And therefore, we always need to work with them. We always need to bring skillful means. We always kind of need to be aware of our thoughts and our behaviors. And we will never be rid of them. There is no purity in Zen. There is no perfection in Zen. And I think that's hard for some people. I think we somehow come to spiritual practice imagining that we're going to perfect ourselves in some way, that we're going to eliminate, we're not going to have any hindrances. Right? And there, there's that suggestion is there You know, the Heart Sutra, which many of you are familiar with, because when we do services, we chant the Heart Sutra. But the Heart Sutra says, I'm just taking an excerpt here, talking about emptiness. It says, so in emptiness, there is no form, no sensation, conception, discrimination, awareness, no eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind, no color, sound, smell, taste, touch, phenomena, no realm of sight, no realm of consciousness, no ignorance, and no end to ignorance, no path, no old age and death, and no end to old age and death, no suffering and no cause of suffering, no extinguishing, no path, no wisdom, and no gain. And thus the Bodhisattva lives prajna paramita with no hindrance in the mind, no hindrance, therefore no fear. Far beyond deluded thoughts, this is nirvana. So that certainly sounds to me like it's suggesting that we can, in fact, transcend these hindrances. No hindrance in the mind, no hindrance, and therefore no fear. And so if we have an idea, as we come to Buddhism, about spiritual purity, there's certainly ample evidence that at least at some times in the history of Buddhism, that has been the aspiration. And that's why monks went off into the mountains, went off into remote monasteries, isolated themselves for decades on end in their pursuit of this practice. But what I would suggest is that at the end of the day, they still had desires. They still had hindrances. Now, I love what it says here. Seeing our desire as what it is allows it to drop away, or at least loosens our hold on it. Sometimes that's the best we'll get, and that's all right. That's enough. When the hold is loosened, when the attachment is loosened, we gain back our freedom. And so we are able to sort of strike a balance with our humanity. Yes, I have these thoughts. Yes, I have these desires. Yes, and yet I can let them go, or at least loosen their attachment so that they don't control me, so that they don't dominate my consciousness. And that's so that I can live in a way that's sane, that's free, that's balanced in some sense. I think that's as good as it gets for us human beings. There are spiritual practices and religions that don't agree with that premise. They tell us we need to annihilate these human weaknesses. We need to annihilate our sensual desires. We need to annihilate all of our tendencies to be attracted, apathy and laziness and anxiousness and doubt, all things that creep into all of our lives from time to time. But in some spiritual practices and religions, they believe that we can totally eliminate all those things. And I'm not talking just about Buddhists here. I'm talking about Christians. Muslims, many religions. And what that usually does, or often does, is results in a repression of our dark side. We all have a dark side. If you don't think you have a dark side, set up an appointment with me this week for a Dyson, please, if you don't already have one. We all have it. It's there. We have harmful thoughts. We think things and maybe even act things that we're not very proud of. We have it. When we acknowledge it, we can work with it. When we try to banish it, we create this sort of prison out of which those things then escape and do terrible, destructive things. And we see that time and again with all of the scandals with clergy. No one faith has a monopoly on those. But what you see, the more pure that the religion is, the more that it demands this kind of moral purity, the more you see these kind of the dark side emerging in horrible, destructive ways. I mean, it just came out, in the Southern Baptist Church, just was the most recent, I think, to have a huge upheaval of inappropriate sexual behavior on the part of clergy. Okay. The only way we can deal with our follies, foibles, etc., our destructive thoughts, our fearful thoughts, all of these things, is to acknowledge them, is to give them some space. The other thing we talk about, the least effective way to get rid of a certain thought or feeling is to try to banish it. There's that old thing about if I told you not to think about the word rhinoceros, right? That you'd all be like, oh, rhinoceros. It would be there, right? That sets up a struggle. We often do this with ourselves. We do this in Zazen, oh, I'm having thoughts. Thoughts have to go away. I'm struggling all of a sudden with the thoughts instead of acknowledging and allowing the thoughts to float by, right? So where we gain power over the parts of ourselves that we don't like is by acknowledging them. Not giving them, the resistance gives them energy, gives them strength by acknowledging them. Oh, and they're just clouds floating by. I don't have to hold on to them. I don't have to push them away. I don't have to do anything other than to acknowledge them and just let go and let the clouds float by. Now, generally speaking, the more times that we do that, the less strength that those have over us. There's the process of addiction that most people are familiar with in some form or another, the idea that there's something, a behavior, a substance, whatever it is, that we try and it's extremely pleasurable. And we continue to do that and gradually become more and more and more attached to the sensation that activity gives us, right? And we know all about dopamine cascades and all the things, the physiologic changes that occur with very pleasurable activities. And so we can become addicted to those, right? Well, there's an opposite process called de-addiction. And de-addiction says that each time that we are triggered and that craving or thought comes up and we don't act, it begins to lose its strength. The original conditioned response becomes deconditioned. We become de-addicted. Well, in the same way, we can become de-addicted to many of our attachments and our delusions by simply not responding, being aware, oh yeah, there it is, there it goes, have a nice day. Letting the clouds float by, but not by saying, oh my God, I'm having that awful thought again. That has it's not productive at all. That's creating destructive, and I've just given that, creating struggle, and it gives that thought power. Now all of a sudden it has power. I don't want that. And so that's the wisdom of Zen. This is fundamental to Zen. This concept of letting go, of just letting the clouds float by, of releasing our attachments, and of gradually, very gradually, de-addicting to our attachments. It's not instantaneous. Many of these, the ones that are stronger with us, will come up hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of times across our lifespan, perhaps. And our job is always the same. Let go. Let go, not feed it, not give it strength, not fight it. So this is very contrary to this sort of notion of spiritual purity, of some, cleansing, purging, eliminating those things that make us uncomfortable. That will only happen through the process of letting go. And as this piece says, seeing our desire as what it is allows it to drop away, or at least loosens our hold on it. Now, part of the reason I thought that this was appropriate to talk about today is because today is Juneteenth. Right? And this is a very important day for African Americans, for many Americans. And it's we're at this amazing moment in history where our dominant white culture would rather make this all go away, right? We don't like this thing. It's messy. It makes us uncomfortable. We've got this huge movement to stamp out critical race theory because it might make a kid uncomfortable. But that's not really the reason. The reason is it makes the adults uncomfortable. So we do the same thing as we're talking about with our attachments and desires, that instead of acknowledging it, the path to healing the deep racial fractures in our society is to start acknowledging. That's what, as far as I understand it, what do I know? old white guy. But as I understand it, in some extent, Juneteenth is about acknowledging. It's about acknowledging the suffering of African Americans in this country. It's about acknowledging the horror of slavery. And it's about finding the path to healing and reconciliation. But that path doesn't go through pretending it didn't happen, ignoring it, not talking about it, trying to suppress it. You know, we've talked about this in other contexts. The path to healing is going through the pain, is acknowledging the pain. And in a certain sense, everyone in this culture, everyone in this society has been diminished in some way by this part of our history. There are no innocents. You know, New England, being in New England, we can think, okay, well, that's not about us. That's about the South. Until you learn that, for example, almost every prominent sea captain in Maine was involved in the slave trade. And that these named towns along the coast that venerate these people, they were the wealthiest individuals. They built big houses up on the hill with the widow walks and the whole deal. They were trafficking slaves down into the South and into the Caribbean. And we can't just shut that history out. We can't ignore that. Because the suffering of the past manifests itself in the suffering of the present. And as long as we continue to try to step around it, ignore it, pretend it didn't happen, minimize it, whatever, it never heals. There's no path forward that doesn't involve acknowledgement. So in a way, it's simple. It's not asking everybody to suffer. We want to annihilate the suffering. We want to relieve the suffering. And we might need to feel a little discomfort or a little pain in that process. And because of the goal, the ultimate goal of liberation for all, we should be willing to do that. We should be willing to make that small sacrifice, which isn't really a sacrifice at all. It's just acknowledging what's there. It's acknowledging the truth. It's stopping the pretense. It's allowing the clouds to do what the clouds do. And this is where Zen is so important in this context, in so many contexts, right? So much of the problems that we are dealing with today come out of this same fact of trying to pretend that these things are not happening. Look what's going on with the climate right now. I was saying earlier, My partner Elizabeth is leaving for Montana in the morning. She's going to her grandson's wedding out there, and she had planned to spend a lot of time in Yellowstone. Well, guess what? Terrible, right? Terrible. And God knows, I don't know what's happened to the animals there with all this either, but certainly it will never be the same. So these things are happening real time, environmental catastrophes. I don't see them. How can we not? The Southwest is running out of water. The West is burning. Montana is flooding. We can go on and on. How can we not? How can we not acknowledge the darkness of our own beings that allows that to happen? The places where our compassion is shut off. The places where things like fear and anger take over. If nothing else, we can perhaps at least be honest. Honest about our fears, honest about our shortcomings, honest about our failings. Because that's the point at which we can start to make changes. It sounds almost absurd to be saying, we need to acknowledge slavery and what it's done for 600 years to this culture, to people in this culture. We need to acknowledge climate change and acknowledge what it's doing to destroy the environment and to destroy so many things in the environment. But that's the fact. You got to take the blinders off. And maybe in the process, we're going to feel some pain. Maybe in the process, we're not going to be so proud of ourselves. Maybe in the process, we're going to have to acknowledge our imperfection. That's a great place to begin. Because that's the truth, right? We are all imperfect. And our spiritual practice is not about perfection, not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming a little bit better. It's about paying attention and being aware and making an effort. If we as a society could do more, paying attention, being aware, making an effort. Oh, what does that sound like? The Buddhist Peace Fellowship, right? Not knowing, bearing witness, responding with loving kindness and compassion. It's such a simple formula. The hard part is applying it. And that first step in this context, bearing witness, is bearing witness to our own shit. And in Zen, we acknowledge, when we're all about shit in Zen. If you're full of shit, you've come to the right religion. But we're all about acknowledging the truth of whatever is there, not a pretense. not putting our coats and ties and pretty dresses on Sunday and pretending that we're not fucking people over from Monday to Friday. Right? We need to be honest about who we are, where we're going, what we're doing. And we need to try to do better. We need to come to the place of loving kindness and compassion. Thank you.
Peter, one thing that's going through my head is, so the idea of sort of that the Heart Sutra, to manifest it, we have to annihilate all the stuff that our ego is comprised of. But I'm thinking that the Heart Sutra is just true in a certain dimension. We don't have to annihilate anything, but in Shikantaza, we let go of everything to the extent that we're in those moments when we're letting go, the instant when we're letting go. That's the expression of the truth of the Heart Sutra right there. We don't have to do anything to annihilate anything. It's just letting go is the expression of the fact that it is true. But if all we do is just be in that truth, we're not going to be able to feed ourselves, so we have to sort of step out of it into the world of the ego, which is capable of doing things and everything. So I don't know. I guess the point is, I don't think that, as my interpretation of Zen is that it's, or of our practice, I should say, is not that it's sort of watering down the Heart Sutra or anything in any way. The practice of letting go is the expression of the truth of the Heart Sutra, but it's just that to live, there's all this other stuff that also manifests. And that has to do with our egos, and all of our egos come from our whole culture, which our culture involves slavery and everything. And, our ego is not, my ego is not completely disconnected from the egos of everyone who exists, it has existed, that influenced the whole culture, which is what formed my ego, and so anyway, that's what I'm thinking.
Well, absolutely. I was hopefully not meant to be sounding like I was refuting the Heart Sutra, because as you say, as far as I'm concerned, the Heart Sutra is absolutely correct, right? And when describing the state of emptiness, when describing the state of non-separation, when describing the state of deep realization, it's right on. It's right on. That's what it's describing. But as you say, we can't live there. Right? We may have those experiences, we may have those times in Shikantaza, and other times when, we're there. But sooner or later, we got to come back, right? And live in this world. And so the key, as I see it more and more, is that we need to kind of be able to freely move within this dialectic. And we need to use each one to inform the other. Our experience of the absolute, of emptiness, of non-separation, transforms and informs our experience of separation. Right? And our experience of separation transforms and informs our experience of non-separation. This going back to the Zen peacemaker formulation, this whole idea of bearing witness. To bear witness, we need a certain degree of clarity. We can't be totally stuck in our own narratives, in our own agendas, in our own desires, and bear witness, right? We got to have some openness. We got to let go of our agendas. Then we can see what's really there. So it's this constant interplay of the relative and the absolute. And, if I'm talking, which I am, like they're two separate things, they are not two separate things. They are absolutely the same thing. But we see it dialectically. We experience it dialectically, and we move. And eventually, though, that's the idea. In Zen, we're looking for a seamless reality. A seamless reality. What does that mean? Where we're not experiencing necessarily the absolute nor the relative, the seamless reality, which is the truth. We need to continually open that path to loving kindness and compassion.
There are just so many ways to say this. Being one with Buddha, being one with Dharma, being one with the Sangha. And no self, no other. You've spoken many times of intimacy. So it needs to be so close we can't see it. Until we screw up again.
What was the last thing you said, Mary Jo? I didn't quite hear it.
It needs to be so close that we can't see it, that we're not even aware, that we're not separating. Until we screw up again.
Until we screw up again. Well, I don't know about you. I don't screw up, but so I can't really relate to that. Yeah. Anybody who has dice on with me knows differently. But anyway, yes, that's what the seamless reality is. It's so intimate that the ideas of separation and non-separation don't exist. There's just this, right? In Zen, we talk about just this a lot because there's really sort of no other words that fit for that reality.
Peter, when you first introduced the practicing with the five hindrances, and you said it's a relief to admit I'm obsessed by desire, I thought for sure you were going to go into the direction of perhaps Zen students being obsessed by the desire to have some kind of wonderful enlightenment experience. And and it was really, it brought me back down to earth when you pulled in Juneteenth and made that uh, desire for, you know, something that's going to feel good to me, uh, see it in a very different, more expansive way, and especially towards those uh, who have been treated so horribly over the years. Um, I, of course, know about the holiday and the basis, but I think you brought it home to Zen practice in a really good way that's not up in the stars. It's right in our earth, right here. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm having a little trouble hearing folks. I'm trying to figure out whether that's the speakers on this computer or are others hearing okay or
We're hearing okay. Everybody sounds fine.
all right. That's just that I'm a hopeless old man. I can live with that. Okay, so yes, and we could go in that direction too. You know, I mean, it's you know, the attachment to enlightenment is a hindrance. It's not just neutral. It's not just something that's not a big deal. It's a hindrance. And so we have to let it go like every other hindrance. You know, I've said this countless times. Ultimately, our practice should be like brushing our teeth. You know, when we get up in the morning to brush our teeth, we're not coming from a place of a great, you know, well, let's put this way. On a daily basis, we might want to have good dental health, but on a daily basis, we're not thinking about that. We get up, we put, you know, brush our teeth, you know, right? It's just practice. It's just practice. It doesn't have some, whatever motivation was there, and there is motivation, it's not front and center. We let go of that and we just do it. It's the same with Zen. Whatever our initial motivation is, however badly we think we want this enlightenment thing, we have to just let go and just practice. And it will pop back up and it'll pop back up. And every time we have to let it go because it is a hindrance. I actually had another one of these things selected that talked about that more specifically. Maybe I'll pull it out for another day, another reading. But you know, but the principle applies across anything that we attach to. They're all hindrances. You know, and it's another sort of dialectical paradox here, right? We have to practice hard. We have to practice diligently. We have to not care about it, right? It's like this, not have any goals, not have any attachments, not have anything we're trying to achieve. And it's like all the others that we're not going to be perfect about that. It's going to pop back up. And all we have to do when it pops back up is let it go. And if we have to do that 1,000 times, that's okay. That's what the practice is. the one body says we're all affected. That's the other level in Zen. If everything is connected, everything is affected. We're never separate, right? One of the things I challenge those of you who are here in Maine today, and I don't know whether it's true in Colorado, it's certainly not true in Florida, I don't believe, is that if you go out today and you go around, there will be no trace of Juneteenth in Maine today. We don't even acknowledge that this holiday exists. It's a federal holiday, but it's about Black people, and there aren't many Black people in Maine, so we really don't have to pay any attention to it. We do that with MLK Day. No businesses in Maine closed for MLK Day. If you go other places, the businesses closed. There are, so we have a breakfast in Portland every year for MLK. But it's, again, it's like, okay, we disconnect ourselves. The things that are happening to African Americans in this culture are not relevant because there aren't a lot of them here in Maine. That's a very interesting kind of exclusionary thinking based on the depths of separation, based on the not acknowledging that we are all connected, that we are all part of the one body, that we're all affected by everything that's happening. Okay. So I've neglected the really important holiday today, Father's Day. And so to all fathers, and a quick announcement. So this is next to the last Sunday that we will be meeting on a Sunday. We'll be meeting on Sunday like this as usual. Susan sent out a notice on this. And then we'll be skipping the 4th of July weekend and resuming the week after that on Thursday evening. So we're going to be on Thursday evenings through the summer at, what did we establish, 6 o'clock? Yeah, Thursday evenings at 6 o'clock. And we'll have to do a little dice on shuffling. Those of you, there are a couple of you, Andrew and John Scott, who have dice on after 6. And probably even, who's 5:45 is Susan. Maybe I like to have a little break between the Dysons and the so we'll probably need to move you and John Scott and Andrew a little bit on. We'll figure that out this week via emails. But anyway, so reminder to everybody, next week will be the last week on Sunday morning, and then and switching over. And Gary, are you able to put a little note on the Treetop site to that effect on our, where it talks about Wild Fox?
Sure.
Oh, thank you.
Peter, one of the things I particularly like about what you're saying this morning is that the past is with us always. And we tend to forget that. My grandfather was a sea captain, and it never occurred to me that he might be transporting slaves. I don't know. He transported mahogany trees and goods around the world, but I wonder, there's no way I could ever find out. But the presence of the past in the present is, I think, extremely important, and many people forget that entirely.
Yeah, well, and from a Buddhist perspective, there is only this moment. There is no past, there is no future. It's here. It's all, therefore, it's all contained here. Everything that has happened, everything that will happen, right here. So yes, and yeah, that, in my own life, I only found out who my father was within the last couple of years, because Elizabeth does genealogy, and she, I had the DNA information, blah, blah, blah. And we did the genealogy, we went back. And so I had relatives, ancestors in Virginia who were slaveholders. I was like, stunned and shocked, but there's a certain way it's important for me to know that, and I have my own sort of ways in which I want to help heal the wounds that caused, the suffering that those people had. But that's very personal in terms of how we want to deal with it, how we want to heal with it, but it has to start from, it's there. It's connected to everyone in this culture, but it's more connected to me because of that genetic past. Okay. Were there any, before we wrapped, any other announcements? Do we have a date, Susan, for the Jukai yet, or Gary and Deborah?
Yes, it is Thursday, August 18th, I think. Yes, Thursday, August 18th.
Okay. So God willing, we will have that ceremony live and in person at Treetop. And you will all be invited to come, and hopefully some people can come, because we need a few. We don't need a cast of thousands, but we need a few people to do the ceremony, and that we will be having 4 Jukais: Susan, Deborah, Gary, and Andrew, whom most of you have not met. Andrew lives down in Connecticut, and he's a wonderful young man, and
And
he'll be coming up.
It will be at 6 o'clock, so it's during our usual sit time.
Yeah, right. It'll coincide with it will be. So those of you who want to join us online, it will be our usual Thursday evening. Okay, good. Everybody have a good Father's Day.